The day my world collapsed didn't begin with thunder or shouting or any sign that my life was about to be set on fire. It started quietly, almost peacefully. The sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow across the marble countertop as I poured my morning coffee. I had no idea that within the next hour that same kitchen would feel like a courtroom, a battlefield, and the place where my husband would destroy the last pieces of trust between us. His name was Matthew, charming, confident, admired by everyone who didn't know him the way I did. For years, he'd been the image of success, a self-made businessman, always dressed in tailored suits, always in control. And I was the wife he liked to show off, but never truly valued. When he walked into the kitchen that morning, his expression was cold, too cold. "Sit," he said sharply. I blinked, confused. "Matthew? What's wrong?" "Sit, now." The tone in his voice made my heart hammer. I sat at the table, my coffee untouched. He stood across from me, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like he was analyzing a criminal. "I want you to tell me the truth," he said slowly, "and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." "What truth?" I whispered. Matthew slammed a thick envelope on the table. I flinched. $300,000, he said. "Gone, from the safe. You want to explain that?" My breath caught. "What are you talking about? Matthew, I haven't even touched the safe. I don't even know the pass—" "Yes, you do." He leaned forward, fists on the table. "You've known it for years. Don't lie to me." My mind spun. "I haven't opened it. I swear to you." He cut me off with a laugh, a terrifying one. "You expect me to believe that, after everything?" Everything was his new favorite word. A word he always used when he wanted to make me feel small, irresponsible, worthless. Matthew opened the envelope and dumped its contents onto the table. Receipts, bank statements, photographs. What is all this?" My voice trembled. "That," he said, tapping a glossy photo with his finger, "is proof that the money is gone. And this," he pointed to a stack of credit card statements, "is proof that you've been overspending, draining accounts, acting like money grows on trees." "I didn't buy any of this," I said, picking up one of the receipts. A designer bag, another for jewelry, a $9,000 dinner. "Matthew, these aren't mine." "Of course you're going to deny it." His voice rose. "Of course you will. But the bank says otherwise. All these purchases are tied to your card." My card. But you—" I stopped, because I remembered. Matthew had taken my card at least a dozen times in the last months. "I'll just borrow it for business," he always said. "My main one's maxed right now. It's just temporary." I had trusted him. "Matthew, you used my card," I whispered. "You borrowed it all the time. You bought these things." "Me?" His laugh echoed off the kitchen walls. "I'm not the one who spends half my days at home doing nothing. I'm not the one who thinks budgeting is optional." That one hurt, deeply. I had dedicated my entire life to our home, to supporting his career, to being the wife he wanted, quiet, obedient, presentable. And now he was throwing that in my face. He straightened up and crossed his arms. "I'm filing a claim in court. For theft. For mismanagement of funds. And before you even ask, yes, I'm serious." "What?" I stood up. "Matthew, you can't. This is insane." "Is it?" He smirked. "Because the evidence says otherwise." I felt dizzy. He walked to the door, paused, and turned back toward me. "Oh, and one more thing," he added. "The safe has only 2 fingerprints on it, mine and yours." "That's impossible." "Really?" He stepped closer, invading my space. "The investigator took samples. You want to guess what they found on the handle? Your prints, all over it." "No," I whispered. No, I never touched it." "So you're calling the investigator a liar?" I swallowed, unable to breathe. Matthew stared at me with hatred I had never seen before. "At first, I thought you were just irresponsible," he said coldly. "But now I know you're a thief." The words stabbed me like a knife. "I didn't steal anything," I said, voice cracking. "Save it for the judge." And just like that, he walked out. The moment the door closed, my knees buckled. I sank onto the floor, shaking violently. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I stared at the fake evidence scattered on the table. My life, my name, my marriage. All of it was being twisted into a nightmare. How had the man I married turned into this monster? My phone buzzed. It was my sister's daughter, my 14-year-old niece, Emily. My bright, clever, always observant Emily. "Aunt Claire, are you home? Can I come over?" I wiped my face and typed back, "Yes, please." 20 minutes later, she walked in and immediately saw the chaos on the table. "Aunt Claire, what happened?" Her eyes widened. I tried to speak, but the words collapsed into sobs. Emily knelt beside me, hugging me tightly until I could breathe again. When I finally managed to explain everything, she didn't react the way I expected. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She frowned, deeply, thoughtfully. "Aunt Claire," she said slowly, "something about this doesn't make sense." "What doesn't?" "The fingerprints, the receipts, the timing. It's all too perfect." I stared at her. Emily leaned closer and whispered, "I don't think you're the one who's supposed to look guilty." I froze. "What are you saying?" Emily stood up, walked to the table, and picked up one of the photos, Matthew standing near the safe. "Aunt Claire," she said, her voice calm but serious, "I think someone set you up, and I think I know who." Her eyes darkened. "Your husband." A chill ran down my spine. Before I could respond, Emily added quietly, "And I think I know how to prove it." The courthouse felt colder than winter itself, the kind of cold that didn't come from the air conditioner, but from dread, from fear, from the knowledge that a single decision could erase your life. As I walked through the tall glass doors, Emily beside me, I felt every pair of eyes turn toward us, judging, whispering, assuming. To them, I was the wife who stole $300,000 from her own husband, a liar, a fraud, a woman who had finally been exposed. Matthew made sure everyone believed that. He was already inside the courtroom when we entered, sitting tall and confident in an expensive navy blue suit that practically screamed power. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look hurt. He looked like a man about to win. His lawyer, Christopher Hale, stood beside him. A shark in human form. Sharp jawline, sharper tongue. Hale had a reputation for destroying his opponents, especially vulnerable women. I heard someone whisper, "That's her? She doesn't look like someone who'd steal that much money." Well, you never know with people like that. Emily squeezed my hand. "Don't listen," she whispered. I nodded, but my knees felt fragile, like glass. One wrong move, and I would shatter. When the bailiff called the courtroom to order and the judge entered, it felt like the oxygen in the room thinned. I sat down, clutching the small notebook Emily had given me for confidence. I wasn't sure it helped. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and unreadable eyes, opened the file. "This is the case of Matthew Carter versus Claire Carter, regarding allegations of financial theft, misconduct, and misappropriation of funds." Hearing my name spoken like that, it didn't feel real. It felt like watching a movie of someone else's destruction. Matthew's lawyer rose immediately. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mrs. Carter stole $300,000 from her husband's personal safe, has a long history of financial irresponsibility, and posed a direct threat to the financial stability of the household." Christopher Hale walked around the courtroom like it was his stage. Mrs. Carter's fingerprints were found on the safe. Purchases were made using her personal card, totaling nearly $80,000 in luxury items. Records also indicate late payments, overdrafts, and suspicious transfers. He dropped a binder onto the table with a loud thud. This is a textbook case of financial misconduct. My heart thumped painfully against my ribs. Then it was Matthew's turn. He stood slowly, with fake sadness on his face. "Claire has changed," he said dramatically. "She hasn't been the same woman I married. She's been reckless, secretive. I tried to help her. I tried to be patient. But when I discovered the missing money, I knew something was wrong." He placed a hand on his chest as if he were the victim here. "I love my wife, Your Honor. but I cannot ignore what she's done. Emily whispered under her breath, "He's disgusting." My attorney, a timid, overworked public defender, did her best, but compared to Matthew's high-priced shark, she looked like a child playing dress-up. "Your Honor," she began softly, "my client did not steal anything. Hale interrupted, smirking. And yet she was the only other person who had access to the safe. Coincidence? The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Hale, I will allow the defense to speak. Do not interrupt again." But it didn't matter. Hale had already poisoned the mood. My lawyer continued, but her voice trembled. "We believe the allegations are unfounded," and Hale held up the fingerprint report. "Let's begin with Exhibit A." My stomach dropped. It was a photo of the safe handle, covered in highlighted fingerprints mine. The judge studied the image. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to explain how your fingerprints appear here?" My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I don't know. I never touched the safe." Hale didn't hesitate. "Convenient," he said, pacing. "Very convenient." Then came Exhibit B. The receipts designer bags, jewelry, electronics, dinners, hotel stays. Items I had never seen in my life. All tied to my account. Exhibit C. A blurry security camera clipped me entering the office where the safe was kept. I remembered that day clearly. I had entered looking for a misplaced document, nothing more. Matthew had edited out the part where he himself entered just minutes after. But the court didn't know that. The judge folded her hands. "Mrs. Carter, the evidence is quite compelling." Compelling. The word felt like a death sentence. My lawyer tried weakly. "Your Honor, we believe these receipts may have been forged." Hale snorted. "Are you suggesting my client risked a felony charge just to frame his wife?" "Yes, that's exactly what he did. But saying it out loud made me sound paranoid, desperate, hysterical." The judge exhaled. "Mrs. Carter, unless you can provide evidence that these documents are false, I must consider the case presented by the plaintiff." Matthew shot me a victorious glance. Emily whispered, "We need to show the video." I shook my head frantically. "Not yet. If it's not enough, he'll destroy us." "We don't have a choice," she murmured. Hale wasn't done. He walked to the witness stand with a dramatic flourish. "Your Honor, we have one more piece of evidence." Matthew rose again, this time with an expression of deep pain. "I hate to do this," he said in a trembling voice that made several people in the audience nod sympathetically. "But I recorded this when I began to suspect Claire was hiding something." He played an audio clip. My voice, except twisted. The recording had me saying words I never said. The money, he'll never find it. Edited, spliced, manipulated. But to the court, it sounded real. My attorney objected weakly. "We question the integrity of this recording." Hale waved her off. "Of course she does." The judge leaned back. "I'm ready to deliver my ruling." My breath froze. Hale smiled. Matthew lowered his head, hands clasped in fake grief. But I saw the smirk he tried to hide. The judge lifted her gavel. In that moment, the room felt suffocating. I heard nothing, saw nothing. Only the blur of faces and the crushing weight of injustice. This was it. My life was about to be destroyed by a man who had planned every step. Emily suddenly squeezed my hand harder than ever. "Aunt Claire," she whispered, I didn't want to do this yet, but..." I turned to her. Her eyes were filled not with fear, but with certainty. "Trust me," she whispered. And before I could stop her, Emily stood up. She stepped into the aisle, holding her phone tightly. "Your Honor." Her voice rang through the courtroom with shocking clarity. "Please, I need to show you something." Gasps echoed. Everyone turned. Emily stood small but unshakable, her voice stronger than it had ever been. "It's about the safe," she said, "and about the money, and about who actually took it." Silence fell over the room. She looked directly at Matthew, and for the first time, his confident smile cracked. For a moment, the entire courtroom froze. Even the judge, who had maintained her composure through every manipulation and every theatrical tactic delivered by Matthew's attorney, paused with her gavel suspended in the air. Emily stood alone in the aisle, small, trembling slightly, but unyielding. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steadying with each word, "you can't make a decision until you see this. Please." The judge lowered her gavel slowly. "Young lady, who are you?" Emily lifted her chin. "I'm her niece," she pointed to me, "and I have evidence that no one else brought today." Matthew shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is absurd. She's a child." "She can't—" The judge's eyes sharpened. "Mr. Carter, you will sit down. Anyone who disrupts this court again will be held in contempt." Matthew sat, but I saw the panic beginning to surface like cracks spreading across glass. Emily approached the judge with her phone. "This is from the home's cloud storage," she explained. "You see, Matthew forgot something important." She plugged the phone into the court's projector system. The entire room went dark as the screen lit up. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. A timestamp appeared in the corner of the screen. 2:43 a.m., 3 nights before the money vanished. The video began to play. We saw the hallway of our home, quiet, empty. Then Matthew appeared. He glanced over his shoulder, making sure no one was watching, and approached the office door, the same office he claimed I had broken into. He punched in the code, opened the door, and slipped inside. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Matthew leapt out of his seat. "This is doctored. I never—" The judge raised her hand sharply. "Sit down." The video continued. Inside the office, the camera positioned high above the doorway captured everything. Matthew knelt by the safe and entered the combination flawlessly. No hesitation, no uncertainty. He had known the code all along, despite claiming only I did. The safe swung open, and stacks of cash gleamed beneath the dim lights. He reached in, grabbing bundle after bundle, stuffing them into a duffel bag he'd brought. Then another figure entered the room. A woman, blonde, young, dressed in lingerie under a loose coat. Matthew's business trips suddenly made sense. Emily's voice narrated gently, "This is his girlfriend. I found her name in the synced messages accidentally sent to the smart assistant." The woman giggled as she helped him pack the money. "Are you sure she won't find out?" she whispered. Matthew laughed, cold, confident. "Claire, she's too naive. And once the court believes she stole everything, she won't even be around to ask questions." The room erupted in whispers. The judge's face darkened. Matthew's attorney looked like someone had ripped the floor out from under him. I felt the world tilt. Hearing him say my name like that, he never loved me. He never respected me. He had planned this months in advance. The video continued. The woman kissed Matthew passionately. "So after this, we disappear? Just you, me, and the money?" Matthew smirked. "Exactly. And Claire will look like the greedy criminal." I felt Emily's small hand slide into mine. My fingers tightened around hers as tears brimmed in my eyes. But this time, they weren't from fear. They were from the shock of truth, finally unveiled. Then came the final piece, the one that shattered every defense Matthew had left. Emily paused the video. "Your Honor," she said clearly, "if you look at the corner here, you'll see the metadata." She zoomed in. The file automatically logged the device ID, the security system signature, the original timestamp, and the encryption hash. "These can't be faked," Emily said. "Not without advanced hacking, and even then, the system would leave traces. But it didn't. This is the original untouched file." The judge leaned forward, studying the data. Her face went stone cold. "Play the rest," she ordered. The video resumed. After Matthew and the woman finished stealing the money, they wiped their fingerprints carefully using gloves. Then Matthew did something even more damning. He used a cloth soaked in something to wipe the safe's handle. Bleach, the same bleach that could remove his prints. But then he did something else. Something he must have thought was brilliant. He took one of my scarves from the laundry basket nearby. He wrapped it around his hand, then pressed it against the safe's handle, smearing it intentionally. He forced my fingerprints onto the metal. A sound escaped me. A strangled gasp. Emily whispered, "This is how they got your prints everywhere." The courtroom had gone silent as a graveyard. Not a single breath could be heard. Then, the video ended on the worst moment of all. Matthew and the woman leaving the office together, the duffel bag full of cash over her shoulder, laughing as they went upstairs into our bedroom. The lights came back on. The judge stared at Matthew with something close to disgust. "Mr. Carter," she said slowly, "would you like to explain this?" Matthew's face had drained of all color. His mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. His lawyer leaned toward him and whispered urgently, "Don't say a word, not a single word." But Matthew was spiraling. "It's not what it looks like," he suddenly shouted. The kid, she faked it. She hacked the system." Emily stepped forward with her usual calm. "Your Honor, I also downloaded the backup file directly from the security company's server. Same metadata, same timestamp. I can show you both copies." Matthew's jaw clenched as realization dawned. There was no way out. The judge folded her hands. "Mr. Carter, this is extremely serious. You are facing perjury, fraud, falsifying evidence, defamation, and theft on top of attempting to frame your own wife. Bailiff—" "Wait," Matthew shouted. "Please, I can explain." But the bailiff was already moving. Matthew backed away, sweating, his confidence disintegrating. His mistress in the video had already vanished into the crowd, trying to avoid attention, but people pointed, whispered, judged. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Carter, you are under arrest." The sound of handcuffs closing around his wrists echoed like a final verdict. As the bailiff led him away, Matthew locked eyes with me. There was no love in his gaze, no regret, no apology, only hatred. "You'll pay for this," he hissed. But for the first time, his words didn't terrify me. Because the truth had finally spoken louder than his lies. I turned to Emily, who was still clutching her phone, her cheeks flushed, her breath unsteady. "You saved my life," I whispered. She looked up at me with those bright, determined eyes. "You just needed someone to believe you," she said softly, "and I always will." I pulled her into a tight embrace as the courtroom buzzed with shockwaves of disbelief. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the weight lifting. The truth was out. And Matthew's world built on lies had finally collapsed. The courthouse emptied slowly, as if people were reluctant to leave after witnessing something so shocking. Like they had watched a film rather than a real woman's life unravel and then stitch itself back together again in a single afternoon. Reporters were already outside. Lawyers whispered among themselves. Even the bailiff who escorted Matthew out looked shaken. But I didn't feel shaken anymore. For the first time in months, I felt steady, grounded, whole. Emily walked beside me as we left the courtroom, still clutching her phone as if it were some kind of magical artifact. In a way, it was. That phone had carried the truth. Truth so powerful, it saved me. Outside, the cold air greeted us like a blessing. "Aunt Claire," Emily said quietly, "are you okay?" I looked at her, really looked at her. This brave, brilliant girl who had stood up in a room full of adults and saved me when I couldn't save myself. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I think I'm finally okay." But the story wasn't over yet. Not for Matthew, not for me. The aftermath in court. The judge called us back into the courtroom 30 minutes later for the final rulings, now that Matthew was gone and the truth was undeniable. She began with a long stare at me, one that held something I hadn't seen from any authority figure during this ordeal: respect. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "you have endured not only a grave injustice, but a calculated, malicious attempt to destroy your livelihood, reputation, and freedom. This court acknowledges your innocence in full." I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The judge continued, "Given the severity of Mr. Carter's actions, perjury, falsification of evidence, theft, conspiracy, and abuse of the legal system, this court is granting you full possession of the marital home." My lawyer gasped quietly. I felt Emily squeeze my hand. "You are also awarded a financial settlement equivalent to the stolen amount plus damages," the judge added, Furthermore, Mr. Carter is responsible for all legal fees. My mind spun, trying to absorb it all. Home, compensation, justice. Everything Matthew tried to steal from me was being placed right back into my hands this time, protected by the law. And finally, the judge said, the restraining order will be enacted immediately. Mr. Carter is prohibited from contacting you in any form. I nodded, tears welling up. Thank you, Your Honor, I whispered. No, she said softly. Thank your niece. I looked at Emily, who grinned sheepishly. The family's reaction. When we stepped outside, my sister ran to us, pulling Emily into a tight hug before turning to me with tears in her eyes. Claire. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I believed him. I shouldn't have. I should have trusted you. It's okay, I said, though my voice cracked. He fooled everyone. She shook her head, guilt painting her face. Not everyone. Emily saw through him from the beginning. Emily shrugged. Well, he was too confident. People who lie always get sloppy. I laughed softly. You're too smart for your own good. One by one, other relatives approached. Apologies, regrets, promises to make things right. I appreciated their words, but I also understood something critical. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and trust, once broken, doesn't return instantly. Still, I smiled, because today was not about them. Today was about me reclaiming my life. Matthew's fall. In the following weeks, news of Matthew's arrest spread like wildfire. His mistress fled town. His business partners distanced themselves. His accounts were frozen. His company faced investigations. A man who had spent his entire life crafting the perfect image was now exposed on every headline as businessman arrested for fraud and attempted frame-up of wife. He tried to call me once from the holding facility, but the call never went through, blocked instantly by the restraining order. I didn't want to hear his voice anyway. He no longer had power over me. The house that became mine again. When I walked into the house, my house after the final paperwork was completed, it felt different. Bigger, brighter, mine. But it also felt haunted by memories, by the conversations that were lies, by the nights he whispered fake apologies, by the moments he told me I imagined things. Emily helped me box up his remaining belongings. We threw away his suits, his colognes, his fake trophies. His duffel bag, the one he used to steal the money, was collected by police as evidence and would never return here. We repainted the walls, bought new furniture, replaced the old framed wedding photos with landscapes and art. By the end of the week, the house no longer smelled like him. It smelled like freedom. A new beginning. One evening, as I sat on the patio watching the sunset, Emily joined me with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. You know, she said lightly, you should start fresh. A new job, a new hobby, new people. I smiled. Maybe I will. She nudged me. Definitely, you will. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. In the months that followed, I slowly rebuilt myself. I took a job at a local design firm, something I had always dreamed of but never pursued because Matthew insisted I didn't need to work. I reconnected with old friends, learned how to be alone without feeling lonely, rediscovered music, painting, cooking things I had abandoned while living in his shadow. Emily visited often, sometimes with her friends, sometimes with her homework, sometimes just to sit silently beside me. She'd become not just my niece, but my anchor. One day she said, Aunt Claire, do you know why I wasn't scared to stand up in court? Why? I asked. Because I knew the truth. And when you know the truth, you shouldn't be afraid to say it. Her wisdom took my breath away. The final release. 6 months after the trial, I took a walk to the courthouse alone. Not for another case, not for a paperwork issue, but because I felt I needed to stand in front of it, to face the place where everything almost ended, and where everything was reborn. I stood there with the sun warming my face, thinking about who I had been before all this. A woman who doubted herself. A woman who trusted a man who didn't deserve it. A woman who thought she was powerless. But now, I was none of those things. I had survived betrayal, humiliation, and the threat of losing everything, and I won. Not by fighting viciously, but by standing in truth. As I walked away from the courthouse, I felt something release inside me, like I had finally shut the last door to my past. And so, my story didn't end in tragedy. It ended in justice, in freedom, in discovering that sometimes the smallest voice, the voice of a 14-year-old girl with a phone and a fierce sense of right and wrong, can be louder and stronger than every lie in the world. Matthew tried to silence me, bury me, erase me. But Emily showed me something more powerful than revenge. The truth always rises, and when it does, the whole world changes. And so did I.